What's up, guys? It's Dem Apples, and today I'm going to be showing you the best openings for white ranked. Some of these might surprise you. So let's just hop right into it. So the first one we have right here is for white is the advanced Caro Con. Now the advanced Caro Con is definitely probably one of the best ways to counter the Caro Con. And it doesn't seem like there's much else besides it. I'm gonna put it in Unbreakable. It's pretty good. Next one is the Advanced French. The Advanced French is pretty good. The Advanced French starts with E4, E6, D4, D5, E5, and it's pretty good, but it gives black some counterplay, and you give black what you want, so black is having a lot of fun there. And because it's good still, I'm just gonna put it in legit. Next up, it seems like we have the Alpine Sicilian. Dude, the Alpine Sicilian is such a boring opening. It goes like this: E4, C5, C3. And you're like, what are you supposed to do, right? The main line goes knight f6, and after pawn e5, knight d5, here, here, here. You'd say, it looks fun? Yeah, it looks fun. No, it's very boring. Well, it doesn't go like this. It goes like this, and then after here, like, white does some stuff. Like, takes the pawn and goes bishop here. It's so boring and bland to play as black and as white. So, for that reason, it's not bad, but I'm gonna put in the really bro. Like, that's what I think every time I see the Alpine Sicilian. Next one we have up is the Bong Cloud. Alright, so the Bong Cloud is clearly the best opening known to man after e5, e4, e5, king e2, king e7. This is the only viable way to proceed, as demonstrated by Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura.
I mean, you're looking at so many different ideas. You're like king f3, you can attack with your king. You can also just continue regular development. You can also play it if you're high as a kite. There are many different reasons that you should play this opening. Because of course, as we know, one of the basic principles in the game of chess is that you want to develop, develop your king early.
Therefore, I'm gonna put the Bong Cloud in Legendary. It's just too good. Anyways, next up, it seems like we got the Catalan. Ooh, the Catalan is pretty crazy. So, usually you would play the Catalan at a high level. The Catalan setup basically just consists of going here, it's like normal d4, d5 stuff, but white fianchettos a bishop, and all of a sudden it's like, the thing is, it's not like the Alpine when there's no play. No, there's no play for black. This is just not fun. This is not something you want to play. Like, this isn't the main line, but I just did it to illustrate a point. The main line goes something like this. And after castles, dc4, queen c2. There's a lot of theory here, but basically white has really active pieces and it's pretty nice. And only white can play for a win. And because of that, and so many good players play it, I'm going to put this in Legendary. Next up, we have the Closed Sicilian. The Closed Sicilian starts with the moves e4, c5, and then knight c3. Now, I find this to be a decent opening, I suppose. I played it for a while. You can transpose into a Grand Prix. You can transpose into some normal open Sicilians with d4. And there are some, like, pretty interesting setups where white just castles. Like, for example, after, I don't even know what you're supposed to do. Let's say d6. And then white just plays the same moves over and over. Like, you don't really need to think here. You go here, and after castles and castles, d3, knight c6. This is probably theory or something. I'm not sure. But then white goes, like, bishop e3, h3, goes f4 and attacks you. And it's an equal position, but it's definitely fine. And so I'm going to put this in legit. Next up, we have the Danish Gambit. Alright. So, the Danish Gambit starts after e4, e5, d4, takes, and I believe c3. And after takes, It's like you have multiple options. You can even sacrifice another pawn. Now this is fun, alright, but most of the times black doesn't take the second pawn, and yeah, black would instead choose to develop a piece. Now, the Danish Gambit, I mean, it's a gambit, so you're giving away material, and it doesn't seem to be that great according to the engine evaluation, but from a practical standpoint, it looks pretty decent. So, I'm going to put the Danish Gambit in tricks only. Like, it's just practical, and even if you don't, like, it's not that hard to refute white's attack. Alright, next up we have the English. The English is 1c4, so c4. And a lot of the times white will go for a 4-knight setup, or like 2 knights here, and black will just copy him, making it 4 knights. A lot of times white will go here and here. There's this famous Botvinnik setup, where basically you move this bishop, and you move these pawns here, and the bishop out. And it's a very comfortable for white, and yeah, if you're playing against the English, I mean, if your opponent plays right, you just cannot do anything. So, I'm going to put this English in unbreakable. Next up, we have the Exchange Caro-Kann. The Exchange Caro-Kann is after e4, c6, d4, and d5. White just takes this pawn, and after a pawn takes pawn, it's like, I mean, it's not, both sides get what they want, right? There's an imbalance. There's an imbalance of c-pawn. So black's missing a c-pawn, but white's missing an e-pawn. And so, like, it's a somewhat strategic game, but also somewhat boring. And so I'm going to put the Exchange Caro-Kann in a legit. It's not unbreakable. It doesn't deserve that. It's just, you know, you play chess. It's just a normal game, but slightly boring. Alright, next up we have the Exchange French. After e4, e6, d4, d5, white takes and takes. So, like, this is really, really boring, to be honest. I've played this a lot with white. I think I beat I think he's an international master now. Like, beat Joseph Levine with this Exchange Caro-Kann, which is kind of funny. I mean, Exchange French. This is known as, like, one of the most drawish openings ever. But there is a little bit of life in it, but I mean, if you're a French player, you're really thinking to your opponent, really, bro? So, this is where the Exchange French is going to go. Okay, next we have the 4 Knights Italian game. Man, oh man, I played this a lot. And I actually beat a couple decent players with it. So, after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, you might see this a lot at lower levels. Like, they copy this, and they go bishop c4, except we're not going bishop c4. Well, you could, but this is the 4 Knights, and it's a starting setup. Now, I played the 4 Knights Scotch a lot, and I managed to be John Daniel Bryant International Master over the board with it. Got kind of lucky, but a win is a win, you know what they say? So, 4 Knights Scotch is one option. Of course, the beginner copycat 4 Knights is definitely viable, but it's just not great. And so, for this reason, I'm just going to put the 4 Knights Italian in the, really, bro. It's, like, kind of boring. Alright, next up we have the, fried liver. This is gonna be interesting. So, after all this, obviously King e2 is the best move, but after knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6, knight g5. This leads to some of the most fun, I'd say, fun lines in all of chess, like, the main line is some random stuff like this. You don't really need to pay attention to this. It's just insanity. And I'm not really sure exactly what black is supposed to do. I believe black is supposed to, like, move out their bishop and then castle and then, like, push all their pawns. There's a ton of sacrifices. It's pretty cool. By the way, white doesn't even have to go bishop e3 or bishop e2. White can even go queen f3, and this is viable because if pawn takes bishop, yeah, the rook is lost, and apparently this is still somewhat fine for black. So these, the fried liver, if you know what you're doing, leads to some pretty cool games. An inaccuracy, not a blunder, is just knight here, because after knight f7, king f7, queen f3, check, king e6, knight c3, knight is under a lot of pressure, and after here, I believe the move is just castles, or like a3 or something like that. It's pretty fun for white. So the fried liver is definitely much better and not tricks only. Pretty good. So I'm gonna put the fried liver in legit. Next up, we got the Giocco piano. I might be biased since I play the piano, and I've also played the Giocco piano a lot. But after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, say bishop c5, knight castles like knight f6, d3 castles, Giocco piano setups roughly go around like c3. They revolve around usually not playing d4 as much, but more about playing b4, a4, and like steamrolling your opponent. For instance, after d6, b4, here, white has gained a lot of queenside space. You're in for a long strategic struggle, but it's most likely going to end in a draw. It's pretty equal. But the Giocco piano is a pretty good opening. I'm going to put it in legit. Next up, we got the Grand Prix. Oh man, the Grand Prix is really fun. So after e4, c5, white starts with the close Sicilian, and after something like knight c6 or d6, whatever black does, white goes here, and against whatever black does, white just, I don't know, just attacks. So basically, I'm just making moves here, obviously, but the idea is after black castles or something, you move the queen to h4, and after queen c7 or something like that, you go f5, and then black continues to do nothing. Let's say, I don't know, let's say they do nothing, right? c8, that looks natural enough. It goes bishop h6, and they take for some reason, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna take, and I'm gonna take here, and then you go here, and you're like, oh my gosh, you just lost. That's the whole idea of the Grand Prix. It's really aggressive. You go here, here, and move your bishop here and win. Very straightforward, but also at the same time not that great. It's pretty easy to stop. We're just assuming black does nothing, and a lot of times black can get a lot of good queenside play and play in the center with knight d4. So I'm gonna put the Grand Prix in, really, bro. And next we got the Grob. Okay. Grob is 1g4. I don't think I need any more explanation. This just weakens the king side. I gain space, but like, really? Like, what? No. So I guess we're gonna have our first garbage opening, the Grob. Alright, next up we got the Italian. Okay. So, after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, we have the Italian. Again, this is the start of the fried liver, the Giocco piano, and a lot of other openings. So, obviously the Italian is pretty good. Because it's the mother of all these openings, I'm going to put it in unbreakable. Next up, we have the King's Gambit. Alright, e4, e5, f4. I've played this over the board multiple times. I have a positive win rate with it, but it's not that great of an opening. Bobby Fischer says it was refuted by d6 or something like that. But of course there are lots of ones. One of the fun ones, not sound, but fun, is the Cosio Gambit or something like that, where white gives away an entire piece but has tremendous pressure. Of course, most people don't play like this. They play like Bobby Fischer, like d6 or like d5, which also leads to some pretty interesting positions after stuff like this. White goes and expands in the center and castles, and it leads to some relatively interesting positions, but if black plays well, the most white can hope for is honestly a draw. So I'm going to put the King's Gambit in tricks only. You're just hoping your opponent doesn't know the theory, and a lot of times they don't. Alright, next up we have the King's Indian attack. So I'm going to leave this with e4, and a lot of the times the King's Indian setup for white, I guess, it's pretty much just this, and then like bishop g2, and then castle, and after all this stuff is said and done, I believe you put your knight on d2, and like say black does stuff on the queen side, you go knight f1, and the meta idea is essentially you move the knight here, and then you move your knight here, and you move all your pieces in, and you push this pawn, you move your queen in, and you win. Now, this is a fairly similar strategy, just a bit more less aggressive, I'd say, less direct than the Grand Prix. And I think it's a pretty decent opening, but you're just assuming black's not doing anything, and black is most certainly going to attack you. So I'm going to put the not the Grand Prix, the King's Indian attack. Really, bro. Alright, next up we have the London system. Okay, as a London system player, I am probably biased, but it's boring if black wants it to be boring, and it's fun if black wants it to be fun. For example, one of the most fun lines in this opening goes after all this. Queen b6, dc5. This is all theory, and it's pretty fun. Rook b1, I believe. Bishop b5. I'll go with g6 because that's even more fun. White goes e4. Bishop e5, queen a5. Sacrifices a piece, I believe, with castles, and after takes, queen takes. Black has to deal with the threat on the knight. I believe the move is bishop d7 or something, but it's really, really fun. And actually, maybe it's knight d5. I actually forget. But this is a very fun line, and white gets to sacrifice pieces, and black gets to be up a ton of material. But, of course, there are the boring French lines. I mean, not French, but rather London lines that go like, I don't know, if black wants to be boring, like black can go for e6, and then take this pawn, and then we basically just have a reversed Caro-Kann, which is it's kind of strategic. But the London system is pretty good, and lots of top players have used it. I'm going to put it in Unbreakable. Next up, we have the Polish. The Polish is very interesting. So let's start with this. 1b4. Yeah, okay, I don't think I need much more explanation. This weakens a4. This makes b4 a target. It's better than 1g4, but not by much. It's better to weaken your queen side and like maybe attempt to gain space than to weaken your king side, because most of the time you're castling king side. But I don't feel inclined to put the Grob, or the Polish rather, into garbage. I don't think it's that garbage. I'll just put it in tricks only because, I mean, it's not that bad. It's not that bad compared to the Grob. Alright, next up we have the Queen's Gambit. Interesting. The Queen's Gambit, d4, d5, c4. The Queen's Gambit is just like one of the most well-known openings in all of chess. And I am actually going to put it in Legendary. I mean, because of its history, you know? It's been around for so long, it's always been solid, and it's just all around a great opening. And it can also transpose to other Legendary openings, like the Catalan. So, I'm going to put it into Legendary. Right, next up we are going to have the Ready. The Ready also starts with knight f3. The downside of this is you let black play d5 pretty easily, but it's alright in c5 if they want. Because you can transpose, usually you can transpose into a Catalan if you like. You can play in English with g3, and oftentimes just c4, here, here, here. And it's a pretty great opening overall. I mean, it just transposes to a lot, so I'm gonna put it in Unbreakable. Alright, we're nearing the end. We have the Roy Lopez up next. The Roy Lopez has been around since the 15th century, if I am not mistaken, and it goes after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop b5. Now, I recommend beginner players to start out with bishop c4 because it's more direct. You see a target right away. But bishop b5 is the preferred choice by most grandmasters, and it's very theory heavy, but it's just such a well-known opening, and it's been through all of chess history. And so for that, I think it deserves the Legendary. Alright, next we have the Scotch. The Scotch is actually more fun than what people give it credit for. After pawn to d4, pawn takes pawn, and knight takes pawn. But like bishop c5, and there's some very fun lines. I think one is bishop e3, others go like knight c6 or whatever. There's some pretty fun lines here. Let's say bishop e3. White threatens to take this. A lot of people go like bishop b6. I'm not sure what the moves are. But like white also usually aims for just quick development, castling. But there are some funny lines where white goes h4, h5. It's just a very interesting opening, but you can also avoid the 4-knight scotch, which would usually arise after knight c3, protecting the pawn, and this is known to be boring, but also what I beat the IM with. So, I mean, think about it. But like after pawn takes pawn, e5. These are like the most fun lines, I believe, after queen e2 or something like that. Like knight d5. I think there's even the move h4. Yeah, and things get pretty wild pretty quickly. So the scotch is a pretty good opening if you want imbalance. I'm going to put it in legit. And next we have the Smith-Mora Gambit. Alright, the Smith-Mora Gambit is after e4, c5, c3. I believe, no, not c3, but rather d4. And after pawn takes pawn, white does not take the pawn back because this is just suboptimal. You give black some free development. But after c3, after pawn takes pawn, black has to play pretty precisely and kind of passively. I believe the setup is something like this, which doesn't look very appetizing, putting all your pieces on the second and third ranks. And then white just has very simple development, brings out all his pieces. It's very natural, and it's definitely not a bad opening. The only downside about it is black can go knight f6, and after knight f6, you're forced to play e5, and after knight d5, knight f3, you've just transposed into the Alapin, which is also boring, so I'm just going to put it in the same one as late Alapin. Right. Next up, we have the sodium attack. I actually didn't know this until now, but the sodium attack is one knight a3 followed by like b4 or c4. Knight in the rim is dim, and it's like this is no exception. After something simple like d5, like your knight can't even go to a decent square anymore. So I'm going to put the sodium in garbage. It's just not decent. Except we have the stonewall. And the stonewall can arise from a variety of setups, but the main idea is this. You go for e3, and after this you play like interesting chess, and after f4, you pray your opponent doesn't know what you're doing. This is similar to the Grand Prix in the King's Indian attack, where you hope your opponent doesn't know what to do. Your idea is essentially to get your knight into e5, and when your opponent continues doing nothing, you go rook h3, hope they don't notice, and after something like this, you sacrifice your bishop, go queen h5, and all of a sudden you win. But of course your opponent's going to do something about it. They can also try to like reverse stonewall you and plug a knight on e4 and go f5. So the stonewall is like a kind of rock paper scissors game, but it's also really boring if your opponent knows what they are doing. And for that, I'm going to put the stonewall into tricks only. And lastly, we have the Tarrasch French. Now, honestly, I feel like the Tarrasch French is better than the exchange French because we keep the tension. So after e4, e6, d4, d5, and knight to d2, we keep the tension between these two pawns. And it's pretty nice for white. Like, setups like these are generally quite passive for Team Black. I believe the move is bishop g5. I could be wrong. And, I don't know. White just has a pretty comfortable position in these structures because of the French bishop, which is just very, very sad. So, the Tarrasch French also, black can play other moves, but here I believe the advanced variation here is better because these knights are a bit redundant and they're getting in each other's way. So that's been it for oh wait, we're going to put this one in. I'll put it in Unbreakable. I think it's the best option against the French. Alright, This is my final ranking for chest openings for white, and yeah, just because I rate something very high doesn't necessarily mean you should play it, but you should play openings that suit your style. For example, like if you're a very aggressive player, you might want to play the Grand Prix or something like that, or the Stonewall, probably the Grand Prix. If you're a passive or positional player, you might want to play the Catalan, the English, or something like that. And if you just want to have some fun, just play the King's Gambit. I mean, it's just fun. Anyways, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye.